Tossing and turning at night? Waking up exhausted? We've all been there. Sounds like it's time to try the melatonin-free CBD sleep gummies from Cornbread Hemp. Cornbread Hemp produces America's first USDA organic, melatonin-free CBD gummy. Fall asleep and stay asleep with CBD sleep gummies that are infused with full-spectrum, flower-only hemp extract and include natural botanicals like valerian root, lavender, and chamomile. They're vegan, gluten-free, and made without a sugar coating. Just clean, natural ingredients. Right now, Cornbread Hemp is offering 30% off your first order. Just go to cornbreadhemp.com/whatnext and use code whatnext at checkout. That's cornbreadhemp.com/whatnext, code whatnext for 30% off.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. When you visit the doctor, you probably hand over your insurance, your ID, and contact details. It's just one of the many places that has your personal info. And if any of them accidentally expose it, you could be at risk for identity theft. LifeLock monitors millions of data points a second. If you become a victim, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year at lifelock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
What do California's Silicon Valley and its Central Valley have in common? These regions both play outsized roles in our national economy. The Bay Area, obviously, it's the mecca of US tech. And while it's hard to think of any industry more crucial than the one that gave us our smartphones and search engines, if you drive just 3 hours north, you'll find the farms that produce a quarter of this nation's food. What ties these industries together is that they both rely heavily on foreign workers. And right now, that's making business complicated for different reasons. This weekend, the White House sent tech companies scrambling with a typical Friday afternoon news dump. The president announced a pretty significant overhaul of how the US will issue a type of work visa called the H-1B.
The H-1B visa is typically for high-skilled tech workers.
Max Blau is a reporter for ProPublica. He covers immigration and agriculture, among other beats.
With the country's H-1B visa program, the Trump administration announced a new increase to the fee that is needed for high-skilled visa holders to obtain a visa. Originally, it was, I believe, $1,000, and that has gone up to, as proposed, to a $100,000 fee.
If the president wanted to drum up headlines, then mission accomplished. But there was also a ton of chaos. Like, did everyone currently in the US on an H-1B need to pay up? Would businesses be on the hook for their workers? One viral scene from inside a departing Emirates flight from San Francisco to Dubai captured this panic as passengers tried to exit the plane before takeoff, worried that they wouldn't be able to get back into the country.
Due to the current circumstances, obviously, that are unprecedented for us here at Emirates, we are aware that a number of passengers do not wish to travel with us, and that's perfectly fine. All we ask is that if you wish to offload yourself.
In this sense, create a lot of anxiety around the workers and their employers as to, for the ones that currently hold a visa or rely on it, whether or not they had to take action immediately to meet the new requirements of the Trump administration. It turns out, it appears that it's only for the incoming batch of future visa holders, but that will still have implications for their employers as well as for who can access those kinds of jobs.
The Trump administration also has its eyes on a different type of temporary work visa. This one's called the H-2A. These cover the seasonal laborers who come to this country every year to work on our farms. But the agriculture industry, it's in a dangerous spot right now. ICE is out there looking for immigrants at work sites, and many undocumented farmers are simply not showing up. Farmers in places like Pennsylvania and New York State, they're sounding the alarm, even closing up because they don't have enough hands. All of this means that H-2A visa recipients could play a more important role than ever in securing the country's food supply. But Trump's proposed budget, it slashes money set aside to make sure this program runs smoothly.
This is a program that, for as long as it's existed, going back to the Reagan administration is a program that politicians have touted as win-win-win. Win for the farmers, win for the farm workers, and win for the economy because of the labor dilemma it attempts to solve for. That is for some farm workers anything but certain, and it's a program that has been for years marked by exploitation and the abuse of those farm workers without sufficient accountability from the government or from other forces that have the power to stop it.
Are you concerned that things are going to get worse as the Trump administration continues?
I think looking forward, you have a Department of Labor budget proposal from the Trump administration that is looking to cut the division that enforces H-2A. So an already understaffed and under-resourced department is bracing for further cuts. And I think fewer resources is not going to fix the problem.
Today on the show, why a work visa program that farmers depend on is about to get worse. I'm Rob Gunther, filling in for Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around.
When did making plans get this complicated? It's time to streamline with WhatsApp, the secure messaging app that brings the whole group together. Use polls to settle dinner plans. Send event invites and pin messages so no one forgets Mom's 60th. And never miss a meme or milestone. All protected with end-to-end encryption. It's time for WhatsApp. Message privately with everyone. Learn more at whatsapp.com.
This episode is brought to you by Saks Fifth Avenue. With the weather getting cooler, if you're like me, you're looking around for a couple of new items for your wardrobe, like a new sweater, some cute new kicks. And Saks Fifth Avenue makes it easy to get creative with your personal style and find the best arrivals for fall. I went over to Saks.com to check out what they've got on tap, and I gotta say, what I love about clicking around their website is that every piece looks special, one of a kind, as if you'd walk into the office or a party and instantly grab everyone's attention. All the big brands are there, stuff like Alice and Olivia, you know, the young and trendy stuff. I love that I can see the care in every piece Saks has chosen for their fall collections. Each dress or pant or shoe feels a little bit elevated. So if you want shopping to be fun and easy, head over to Saks Fifth Avenue for inspiring ways to elevate your personal style every day.
So Max, how is the H-2A visa program supposed to work?
The H-2A visa is a temporary visa that typically for a farm worker gives them up to 1 year in the U.S. to work on a specific farm for a specific farmer or for a farm contractor that works with a bunch of different farms. So you have one boss and a predetermined farm or set of farms that you go to for anywhere from 3 weeks or so to a year. Being in the country as a H-2A worker does not set you up on a pathway to citizenship. One of the opportunities it provides to the H-2A worker, though, by coming here temporarily, is that it's a depending on what country you come from, it can dramatically boost your economic opportunities compared to what you are making back home.
Right, because you're getting decent pay. Well, like, how much are they getting paid? And then they're also getting free housing as well, correct?
That's correct. So I think it's about over 9 out of 10 workers in the program come from Mexico. There are other Central American countries and countries as far away as Jamaica, South Africa that there are H-2A workers from, but by and large, most workers are from Mexico, and according to the government, they are unmarried, middle-aged men most of the time. And if you're looking at that average Mexican male farm worker, according to the government in Mexico, I think the average worker gets about $4 an hour. And depending on which state you go to in the US, there's a minimum wage for an H-2A worker that could be anywhere from, say, $15 to $20. So, you know, you're getting 4 or 5 times more per hour than what you can make back at home.
Mm.
You did note that, yes, there is housing that is free, and there is also additional benefits too, like the farmer is supposed to pay for the cost of travel once the worker is here and gets reimbursed. And there are other benefits as well, including just safety regulations and protections that a worker can get through the H-2A program that they may not get as an undocumented worker.
And an H-2A visa holder can stay for up to a year, but they can also come back year after year. Is that correct?
That's correct. And in some cases, a farmer can apply to keep them here for, beyond the 1 year mark. So I think in some cases, like up to 3 years is the maximum you can do on one visa. And then there are workers, of course, who go back and then, come back on a different visa as well.
The program has grown over time, with 378,000 H-2A positions certified by the Labor Department in 2023. That's 3 times more than a decade before. And with that growth, managing H-2A workers has become a business of its own. Often, farmers will hire independent contractors to find workers and get them to the U.S.
The other thing that the contractors will do is they will also, once the workers are here, be their managers and bring them to the fields and have them the contractors are sort of the go between their boss, the farmer, and the farm workers who are in a place they've never been to before and are just at the mercy of, good or bad, of the farm labor contractor.
Mm. Yeah, for ProPublica, you and your team put out this deeply reported story about one of these middlemen, this guy named Javier Sanchez Mendoza Jr., and it's just harrowing. It sounds like he's a human trafficker, the way that you lay out the story. Can you tell me what kind of an operation he was running?
Yeah, so Javier is one of these farm labor contractors who he's a case study of what can go wrong with the H-2A program and how someone can exploit it. Javier was someone who was born in Mexico, but as a toddler, his parents brought him to the U.S. And he was raised in Southeast Georgia. Both of his parents worked in agriculture, and eventually he started to work as a farm worker as well. As a kid and in his early teenage years.
Mm-hmm.
After graduating high school, he went to college briefly, but then realized there was significant money to be made in the farm labor contracting business. And the story that we tell lays out, what happens when Javier goes and works with a farmer named Charles King, who was relatively new to agriculture and was just starting up a blueberry farm outside of Waycross, Georgia. He was someone who didn't speak Spanish and wanted to find the labor needed to pick his blueberries and get them to consumers around the state. So Javier agrees to work with him and has people back in various towns throughout Mexico that are in these communities touting the prospect of coming to the U.S. on an H-2A visa.
I was really struck by the narrative details of your story. You do a lot of the storytelling through the eyes of a young single mother in her 20s named Sophie. And you paint this picture at the beginning where Javier is smoking a cigarette, watching this busload of people come off and get dropped off at a motel. And right away, he's got eyes for Sophie. And that it's just, he has the worst things planned for her. What is the story that unfolds here?
Yeah, so Sophie, as you noted, was in her at the time was in her 20s. She was a single mother, had a 3-year-old toddler boy, and wanted to do better for him. She grew up in a rural, tight-knit farming community in Mexico. Her dad was a farm worker. She learned the basics of farm working from her dad. And her dad had also come to the U.S. When she was young, and she had seen firsthand the benefits of what a U.S. farm working job could bring to a family like hers back at home. And she wanted to do the same for her son. So she fills out the application and submits it to Javier. Javier sees the application. There's a photo of her attached. And they start texting back and forth. And he starts to text her, according to federal prosecutors in this case, text her flirtatious messages. And, you learn along the way that Javier had been, usually his practice was to charge farm workers over $1,000 for an H-2A, for the chance of getting an H-2A visa. That is a practice that is not allowed, but was doing this as kind of just the standard practice of his business. But with this mother who wanted to come to the US, and we call her Sophie in the story, he offers to not charge Sophie for her to come on the conditions that, she pays special attention to him. And Sophie is very adamant about just only wanting to come and work in the US, and not to give in to the flirtatious text or do anything like that. And ultimately says yes to his offer of waiving the illegal fee and just hopes things are going to work out.
Even before Sophie arrived in the US, it became clear Javier's operation was not above board. First, she was put on a bus and given a wad of cash to transport to the US with instructions not to get caught by border agents. When she arrived in Georgia, her passport was confiscated. Javier quickly began bringing her around with him everywhere, including to his business meetings. He forced her to live with him, and he routinely sexually assaulted her. According to testimony Sophie would later give to federal prosecutors, Javier was hell-bent on controlling her and making it clear there were no escape routes.
One day early on, he drives Sophie out to a courthouse and hands her a document that's written in English and that she can't read. When she asks what that document is, he doesn't say what it is. He, as she recalls, did a thing that he would often do, which is to threaten to deport her if she didn't comply with what he was asking or ordering. And so she signs the document, and it's only afterwards that she learns from him that it was a marriage license. So she was tricked into believing that she was married to him for a year. I say tricked because it was, as we get to later in the story, the paperwork was never turned in. So while he was treating her and calling her his wife throughout the year, they were not actually married. But between the abuse, the forced marriage, the sexual violence that she experienced over the course of a year, the full promise of the H-2A program and the opportunity that she was supposed to get is subverted into this nightmarish experience. And on top of everything we just talked about, she was never paid for any of that, any of the work she did, even if it was illegal, and was forced into this situation that she couldn't have imagined in her wildest dreams.
So just to put the whole scheme into perspective here, you have a guy, Javier Sanchez Mendoza. He is collecting fees from migrants in Mexico. He's collecting fees from the farmer in the United States to get these H-2A applications. And all the while, he's picking out certain individuals that he has his eyes on to basically live in a form of violent servitude. I couldn't help but notice that the federal prosecutor in this case quotes this as a system of modern day slavery. Is that the whole gist?
Yeah, that's right. And I think it's worth noting, the history of agriculture in the South, and this is a region where I live, where I've done ag reporting in the past and written about forced labor and various forms of subsidized or free labor at the cost of others. I think when you talk to experts that really think about this issue on a routine basis, there's a through line that exists that's as old as the American South, that goes from slavery and convict leasing and sharecropping through earlier programs, guest worker programs like the Bracero program, and then the H-2A program is like the modern manifestation of that. And while the H-2A program is not anywhere as bad as say slavery or convict labor in like the era of like Doug Blackman's Slavery by Another Name, the geography of where some of that is happening on these farms in this region, that is part of the history and the past of this place.
We'll be right back.
Decisions made in Washington can affect your portfolio every day. But what policy changes should investors be watching? Listen to Washington Wise, an original podcast for investors from Charles Schwab, to hear the stories making news in Washington right now. Host Mike Townsend, Charles Schwab's managing director for legislative and regulatory affairs, takes a nonpartisan look at the stories that matter most to investors, including policy initiatives for retirement savings, taxes and trade, inflation concerns, the Federal Reserve, and how regulatory developments can affect companies, sectors, and even the entire market. Mike and his guests offer their perspective on how policy changes could affect what you do with your portfolio. Download the latest episode and follow at schwab.com/WashingtonWise or wherever you listen.
Recently, we asked some people about sharing their New York Times accounts.
My name is Dana. I am a subscriber to the New York Times, but my husband isn't. And it would be really nice to be able to share a recipe or an article or compete with him in Wordle or Connections. Thank you.
Dana, we heard you. Introducing the New York Times Family Subscription. One subscription, up to 4 separate logins for anyone in your life. Find out more at nytimes.com/family.
Well, I was down on my last dollar and then I started saving because the bank said fiscal restraint is what you're craving. So I put my earnings in a high yield account. Let the savings compound and the interest mount. I'm optimizing cash flow, putting debt in check now. Time is my friend and not a pain in the neck. And we've got a little cash to rebuild the old deck.
Boring money moves make kind of lame songs, but they sound pretty sweet to your wallet. PNC Bank. Brilliantly boring since 1865.
Eventually, Javier was caught, prosecuted, and sentenced to 30 years in prison. Sophie, who testified in his trial, was granted a special visa for victims of sex trafficking that allowed her to remain in the U.S. She still gets migraines now and then from Javier's beatings. Javier declined multiple requests from Max for an interview, and Charles King, the farmer who employed him, also declined to comment for this story. But he apologized at his own sentencing hearing, saying, quote, his actions were not acceptable. But Max says cases like Sophie's are likely still common.
You know, I don't think there's a exact number of how many people have been exploited or abused. I think it's safe to say she is an extreme outlier in the sense of the kinds of abuses that she faced. But there have also been workers who have died in fields because of problems with the H-2A program. There have been many workers who have faced things like wage theft, who were charged illegal fees and then not paid until they were able to pay off the debt that they shouldn't have had in the first place. There is no shortage of verbal threats and sexual assaults or violence in the fields. Like, those are things that when you talk to farm labor experts are all too common. I think, to give you a sense of where Sophie's case fits into like Georgia, you know, she is one farm worker in this thing called Operation Ballooning Onion, which is a in 2021 in the moment that prosecutors described the case as a form of modern day slavery, they were unveiling this what is believed to be one of the largest H-2A labor trafficking investigations in our country's history. And it's one in which there were thousands and thousands of other examples of exploitation of abuse, some of which are documented, and many more, I suspect, that have not been reported because of the moment we're in and the fear of speaking out.
Is it clear why this system in particular leaves so many of these workers vulnerable?
I think part of it comes down to the fact that one of the clearest ways to stop this kind of abuse from happening is to enforce the current laws that we actually currently have. And one of the departments that is responsible for that is the Department of Labor. For years, though, there's been chronic understaffing and a lack of resources that the department has had. I've heard that from people who have worked there. I've seen that in federal watchdog reports about their investigations and oversight. And even though there's been lots of outside pressure over the years from groups like UFW, as well as lawmakers like Georgia U.S. Senator John Ossoff. And even though there are people inside the government who have talked about the problems, it's a thing that everyone knows is a problem, but still hasn't like put enough funding or staffing behind the issue to do more thorough, proper investigations. And that is something, given that this program is continuing to grow each and every year, and there are ongoing cuts to the Department of Labor staffing and budget, is a problem that could be magnified in years to come.
Yeah, I read your story and I couldn't take my mind off the fact that even in this landscape where there is hardly enough enforcement to make sure that all of these workers are safe, when they do look into the condition of these workers, they always find some sort of violation. It was something like 8 out of 10, if I'm remembering correctly. What does that say to you?
You're absolutely right. I mean, that comes from a report from the Government Accountability Office that showed that 84% of the investigations conducted by federal regulators found at least one violation of the rules that were designed to protect those workers. The Department of Labor has limited staffing, which means they are largely only responding to complaints that are coming in, as opposed to doing more proactive investigations if they had more manpower or person power to do that. And so to advocates, that's seen as the high violation rate is the tip of the iceberg, and that if they were actually looking more broadly beyond the people who are in situations that are so bad that they have no choice but to complain, that there would be even more violations out there to be found. And I also think it's worth noting that this is an issue that affects anyone who buys groceries in this country, in the sense that, like, if you look at it, take ourselves away from the experience of the farm worker and from Sophie themselves, and you step into your Kroger or your Walmart or your Publix or your Albertsons, it is very hard to know whether or not the product that you're buying is one that had some kind of ethical procurement, and there were H-2A workers or undocumented workers picking that in a way on a farm that treated them fairly, or if it was an experience like one of Javier's workers may have had, where there was stolen wages, abuses, and exploitation. And there are places, in particular, there's a program called the Fair Food Program that is trying to change the way that workers are being treated in the fields, and by getting buyers to these grocery stores to agree to only buy produce from farms that are paying better and offering better protections to those workers. There are solutions like that that are out there in limited, isolated farms right now that can solve some of the issues that we're seeing, and also give all of us as consumers like more confidence and more faith that what we're buying is not tied to this problem, because we are putting our money into a system that is allowing people like Javier to, in some cases, get hired.
Here's what I'm reading outside of your reporting. I'm seeing that because Trump's DHS is going after so many undocumented immigrants, there are lots of farmers who are not showing up to work at places like dairy farms in Pennsylvania and New York, and these places are having to shut down. I'm seeing that we're looking at the Agriculture Committee in Congress is trying to push reforms, but that's slow moving. I'm seeing that the Departments of Agriculture and Labor are also trying to write new rules to perhaps change how farmers can get more H-2A reforms, because it looks like the number of visas, of these H-2A visas, which there's no limit to how many the government can give out, is only going to increase. Do you have a sense of what the future looks like for farmers and for guest workers?
So I think there's two ways to look at this, and the answer will probably be somewhere in the middle. On one hand, if the Trump administration, let's say they were 100% successful with their efforts to deport undocumented immigrants in this country. If you were to get rid of 4 out of every 10 farm workers in this country, there are two things that can happen. One is you convince Americans to go back into the fields and do something they've been moving away from for many years. And they would either have to accept wages for harder work to keep consumer prices the same? Or our food systems raise the wages for US born farm workers and then in turn increases it turns your $3 pint of blueberries into a 5 or to $10 pint of blueberries, depending on the wage increase. On the other side, the answer is finding workers outside of our country. And one agricultural economist that I spoke with estimates that by 2030, he believes we'll go from over 300,000 farm workers to H2A farm workers to close to or perhaps surpassing 500,000. So there's going to be an increase in H2A workers, I think, more likely than not. The question is, how exponential will that growth be?
And what rights will they have, and how much will they be getting paid?
Well, the promise of the H2A program will still be there. But if we are dramatically growing the H2A program to where there's more workers than ever before, and we're cutting the investigative firepower to ensure that the promise of the H2A program is a reality in the fields, then I would not be surprised if there would be more Sophies ahead.
Max Blau, thank you so much for your time. Really grateful for you coming on here and sharing your reporting with us.
Thank you for highlighting our reporting. I appreciate you talking with me on this.
Max Blau is a ProPublica reporter covering healthcare, the environment, agriculture, and immigration. And that's the show. What Next is produced by Elena Schwartz, Anna Phillips, and Madeline Ducharme. Paige Osburn is the senior supervising producer of What Next and What Next TBD. Mia Lobel is the head of audio here at Slate. Ben Richmond is the senior director of podcast operations. And I'm Rob Gunther. You can find me on Blue Sky. I'm at @OneRobGunther. Thanks for listening. Talk to you soon.
Decisions made in Washington can affect your portfolio every day. But what policy changes should investors be watching? Washington Wise is an original podcast from Charles Schwab that unpacks the stories making news in Washington right now and how they may affect your finances and portfolio. Listen at schwab.com/WashingtonWise.